Hi, I'm Caroline Fairchild, and welcome to Working Together Live, a show about equity in the workplace with the leaders changing the face of business. Nearly 50 million couples face infertility problems every year, and yet fertility benefits are still not common at most workplaces. Our next guest is trying to change that by bringing fertility discussions out of the shadows and onto the office floor. Joining me now is Tammy Sun. She is the co-founder and CEO of Carrot Fertility, a global fertility benefit for employers. Prior to founding Carrot in 2016, she held positions at Evernote as well as the Federal Communications Commission. Tammy, welcome to Working Together Live.
Hi, thanks so much. It's great to be here.
It's great to see you again. I've so enjoyed our conversations throughout the years as you've built Carrot. We haven't spoke for quite some time since this pandemic began, and I can't believe that we're still going through this. How has this last year been for Carrot? What's been going on?
You know, it's been certainly a sad and tragic time just generally in the world, but it has been a really important time for healthcare, and fertility healthcare has not been excluded from that. We've seen just a huge acceleration in adoption of Carrot and fertility benefits across employers as well as health plans. And I think it really points to a fundamental truth, which, you know, we all know and we've talked about on the show before, which is people consider fertility healthcare to be a fundamental part of their human healthcare. And that's a really important sort of new idea. I think decades ago and for a long time, fertility treatments and access to this type of healthcare was considered more of a luxury consumer good and a nice to have. What the pandemic has done is it has really brought fertility to the table as a first-class benefit and something that should be a standard part of compensation and benefits at work.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit deeper. I want to hear from you. What trajectory do you think fertility benefits would be on if COVID-19 didn't happen? What was the differentiator that made these discussions different because of this crisis?
You know, I think the acceleration of, for example, telehealth has been a really important aspect of how the fertility space has evolved. The number of fertility clinics in the country remains somewhat limited, and through our product, people are able to now much more easily access experts in, somebody in the middle of the country can access experts in New York and the same experts in California as people who live there. And so I think the pandemic has really accelerated a deeper understanding across healthcare that telehealth is important.
Let's talk about Carrot more specifically. It's a global fertility benefit. For those who don't know what that means, what does it exactly do? What can you expect if your employer offers Carrot?
Well, I mean, over the past 20 months have really shown us the value of distributed work. And one of the patterns that we are seeing among employers is that distributed work also very much means global distribution. And employers, large multinational employers, but even smaller and mid-market, fast-growing mid-market companies are going global faster than they ever have before. And so what Carrot does for many of the top employers in the country and frankly the world is we allow them to deliver a fertility benefit equally to an employee in New York, as an employee in London, as an employee in Japan, as an employee in Singapore. And that's important in terms of benefits parity across an entire global workforce.
How did you accomplish that, though? I'm assuming that delivering these products, these services, country by country is a challenge. Yeah. Were there certain countries that were more challenging than others? Walk us through how you did make this platform global.
So we've been working on this platform and building this platform for more than 4 years. We've worked in tandem with our customers, and we have millions of data points at this point that allow us to navigate sort of key areas of healthcare that are different country to country, as you've alluded to. Many countries, have laws that prohibit access to some types of care for some types of people. We're able to navigate those laws and then help people access care across a border if that's appropriate. We have provider networks, the same as we do in the US. We have provider networks across more than 60 countries around the world so that Carrot members are able to access care at high quality providers. And an important point on providers is that providers don't just mean fertility clinics and fertility doctors. We also support adoption. We support gestational carrier care. So we think about providers from a legal perspective as well, for example. We also importantly support payments, and access to affordability, access to employer-sponsored coverage is a critical part of caring. And so we're able to allow members around the world in 62 countries, including the US, to seamlessly pay for their care through the Carrot Card, for instance.
Well, Tammy, so much of your work centers on making fertility care just table stakes of healthcare. And part of that is just understanding that infertility is so much more common than people think, and it often goes undiscussed. When you think about why these discussions aren't happening, particularly in the workplace, what comes to mind?
Well, did you say why they are happening or why they aren't happening?
Why they aren't happening. I certainly haven't discussed fertility with a colleague anytime soon. I'd love to hear if anyone in the stream has.
Yeah, I think infertility continues to be a major issue, and it will continue to sort of grow in prominence as both men and women pursue parenthood and have kids and expand their families later in life. For the first time, more women over the age of 30 are giving birth than women under the age of 30, and our biology hasn't changed. And so infertility is certainly on the rise. So is access to more proactive fertility care, fertility preservation for males and females in the form of egg freezing, sperm freezing, and even embryo freezing. I think, the culture, to be fair, has really accelerated over the past several years. And I think there is a much deeper willingness and a much more openness on behalf of both employers and employees to talk about these things at work. But the work isn't done yet. There's still quite a bit of stigma. And so when we work with our customers, we see some interesting patterns, and might be useful for folks who are watching, who are thinking about like, how do I maybe bring this issue up, or how do I talk about this with a colleague or a boss at work? And a couple of those tactics include, we see these issues sort of coming up through ERG groups. So LGBTQ groups, women groups at work, where you can socialize the idea of Carrot and having fertility benefits with a small group of people, and then that group can escalate it to HR or the benefits team. We see a lot of sort of advocacy on behalf of colleagues and friends. And so if you yourself may not need access to fertility benefits, may not need access to fertility healthcare, but somebody who works with you who would benefit from it, but they're too, they're shy, they don't want to talk about it, they feel awkward talking about, their medical care. You can actually buddy up and advocate for them with the benefits team and with the HR team. I think an important point is that oftentimes HR teams are thought about as intimidating and scary to talk to. In fact, all of the HR leaders that we've ever interacted with, and at this point, I've talked to thousands of leaders in this role, they desperately want to know what are the things that their employees will use and engage with. So
I think if there are any HR leaders joining us on the show right now, they would shudder to think that employees are scared to talk about them given their demeanor. But it's true. People are scared of HR for reasons that I don't understand. And I do like that idea of socializing fertility benefits, socializing that as a conversation at work. Because look, this is a conversation that we have to have, I think, in order to right some of other inequities that happen in the workplace. There are many studies that show that motherhood is the biggest differentiator and contributor to the gender pay gap. How do you think that this conversation under fertility can make maybe more women get equal pay?
This is a huge topic and something that I care deeply about, and I've written about in the past as well. Access to fertility benefits is part and parcel. It is intricately connected to pay equity. In this country, whether we like it or not, whether we agree or we disagree, healthcare is delivered mostly through employers. More than half of all Americans get their healthcare through their jobs. You and I do, certainly. And when a specific area of healthcare, like fertility, is not covered as part of standard compensation and benefits, that inherently imposes a tax on certain populations more than others. So for example, I went through egg freezing myself. I spent, $45,000 on several cycles of treatment. I had to pay for that out of pocket. And because I had to pay for that out of pocket, the opportunity cost of that $40,000 or $45,000 was not realized in other ways. I could have invested. I could have, bought a car. I could have done all sorts of things with that money that I wasn't able to do because I had to pay for fertility treatments. And when you think about, who is disadvantaged, it's same-sex couples, it's single intending parents, it's people on different, in lower economic and income stratas. And so when we think about equity and when we think about compensation and we think about pay, making sure that fertility benefits is a fundamental part of your healthcare stack is a way to address pay equity.
Such good points. And Tammy, I appreciate you sharing your own story. I think putting the face to it, putting someone's own equity into it, I think really tells a different story. But let's do something that I love to do here on Working Together Live, which is bringing the men into this discussion. I think a lot of people who are joining us would probably be surprised to know that 40% of Carrot members identify as male. Walk us through that trend and why for some people who are joining us that might be surprising.
Yeah, it's a really important trend, and it's important for women. So as I've said, like, I'm a woman, I've gone through fertility treatments, I care deeply about women's health. I think that fertility has for too long largely been considered a women's health issue. And what we see in the data is that as many males, as many men actually benefit and can engage in fertility healthcare as women. And it's important for women that every single person, every human, everyone has a way and has a stake in the fertility healthcare system. And so, men are looking at, for example, gestational carrier care. It's a hugely fast growing part of our members. A lot of members are pursuing surrogacy and GC care for various reasons. Certainly, as opposite sex couples have children later, there might be some reasons where the female can't carry the pregnancy, and they would certainly have a need for gestational carrier care. But actually, the biggest driver for surrogacy and GC is from same-sex male couples. Mm-hmm. And their experience in thinking about how to pursue parenthood, thinking about how to form families is in many ways much more complex, much more expensive, much more time intensive, and those are some of our most fastest growing types of cases.
Fascinating. Now, Tammy, when I read that 40% of members of Carrot identify as male, two things came to mind. There was an article late last year saying that we have to just stop talking to women about imposter syndrome. And then early this year, there was an article in the Times saying that we have to stop just talking about women when we think of burnout. We have to bring men into these conversations as well.
Yeah.
If you can wave a magic wand and make fertility not just a women's issue, but a healthcare issue, what do you think that would do?
Well, I think it would absolutely help to level the playing field, right? I mean, I think when for example, if fertility is only considered a women's issue, if it's only considered a women's healthcare issue, then women carry all of the tax and all of the burden, both the economic burden, as we've talked about in terms of the costs and the financial costs when it's not an employer covered benefit, but also sort of the psychological and the emotional labor that is attached to doing the work of managing that aspect of healthcare. Nearly a third of infertility cases are related to male factor infertility, but we really haven't built a system and built products and services before Carrot that treat males and females equally in this sense and give them both ways to engage in this aspect of healthcare. Now, women certainly have unique needs. As a woman, I know that's true, but I think it's important for women and for the healthcare system that this is inclusive of women's health, but broader and a part of, as you said, sort of a fundamental part of the human healthcare stack.
I agree with you, Tammy, and I'm seeing some members in the stream who are appreciative of your work as well. Gary says, trust is important to support open communication, to get support and provide support to our team. So Gary, thanks for joining us on Working Together Live. Tammy, let's go back to the pandemic and some of the trends that have run across the economy, as well as how couples are behaving right now with their parenting decisions. Mm-hmm. A lot of couples are deciding to delay having children right now because of COVID, particularly here in the US. What does that mean for the work that you're doing at Carrot and for fertility benefits more broadly as employers are thinking about adopting these?
Yeah, I mean, the demographic trends of this country have been changing for a long time. And I think COVID-19 and the pandemic has, thrown another wrench in it. And we certainly see within our member base an acceleration of fertility preservation services. So that includes egg freezing, sperm freezing, but also embryo freezing. And I think that's just another factor that plays into how dynamic the demographics are changing, not just in this country, but in many, dozens of countries around the world that are sort of facing new population trends and new demographic trends. I think preservation in particular will become sort of a very mainstream part of fertility healthcare and fertility treatments in the next 10 years as people really look to thinking about, okay, having a little bit more control and a little bit more intentionality and a little bit more optionality in timing how they want to begin and expand their families.
And that's a big trend that you just discussed in terms of women delaying the decision to have children right now, same-sex couples as well. But I want to talk about also how many people are quitting their jobs right now or changing industries right now. How does fertility benefits play into that? What are your members telling you in terms of how important it is to have fertility benefits at this time, given how tight the labor market is?
This is the tightest labor market I think I've ever seen. I don't know about you, but it is incredible what we're seeing. And in terms of the customers that we work with, I mean, we work with many of the top employers in the world. 96% of people who engage with Carrot and use our product tell us directly that they are more likely to stay in their job longer because they have access to Carrot. And I think that is a really powerful signal of how sort of designing the right benefit strategy for an employer can really have an impact. In this economy, in this sort of pattern of resignation and sort of changes in jobs and how dynamic that's moving, the retention value of a single employee is huge. And so what we see is, employers really doubling down on DE&I efforts, making sure that fertility healthcare through Carrot can be accessible to everyone, irrespective of age and sex and sexual orientation and gender identity. But we also see folks doubling down on this area of benefits and healthcare for talent retention reasons. And so, that's been a really big trend.
And behind that trend, in terms of talent really looking to fertility benefits as table stakes for their healthcare options at work, is just the high cost of fertility benefits. We have a question here from Taylor, who's asking, what are healthcare providers doing to control the cost of fertility treatments procedures so that these benefits can be sustainable offerings for employers?
Yeah, so the cost issue, healthcare is so opaque. We often don't see the cost of different treatments and services as consumers that we have access to. Fertility is unique in that we often see those costs because for a long time the system has been built for consumers. If you had the money and if you were able to pay for and financially access this type of healthcare, then you could do it. But if not, it largely was excluded, as we've discussed, from the employer healthcare system. I think we're seeing a lot more pressure in that ecosystem now. You're seeing, as more employers begin to, roll this into, the core healthcare stack, as they begin to offer Carrot, as they begin to offer fertility benefits, and as more clinics are being built, there's certainly dynamics in there that will continue to drive down the cost of care, I think, over the next few years. And there is some interesting work being done, at the lab level, the embryology lab, and there's other areas where people are taking a hard look to see if they can innovate to make various aspects of the treatments and the services faster, better, and cheaper.
Well, I'm optimistic that we can get the cost down as well, but we have some members who are joining us who are a little less optimistic. We have Nadine saying, if this country cannot even pass a bill that includes family leave, then I'm not optimistic about ever getting fertility benefits. Tammy, I'm sure you were disappointed late last year when that didn't pass. Does fertility benefits even fit into that discussion, or how are companies in that space responding, acting about things like paid family leave?
So I was certainly disappointed, and I'm hopeful that more progress can be made on that in the coming years and hopefully months. But the great thing about fertility benefits and the great thing about fertility coverage that is differentiated, and where I hope you will have more hope, is that this is largely controlled by employers. It's largely controlled by the private sector. And in this country, because more than 150 million people really get their healthcare through their jobs, through their employers, the ability to partner with employers and with health plans can allow us to accelerate progress in the area of fertility healthcare in a way that I hope will be faster than working through government and working through legislation. And I think that's one of the exciting things about this benefit and this area of healthcare is that our primary partners are employers and health plans, and the rate of adoption, I think we can be excited and hopeful that the rate of adoption will be actually much faster than the time it takes to pass a major piece of legislation.
Well, I hope so too. Tammy, the other trend that I wanted to talk to you about that is a little off-putting is just venture capital dollars and how much of that is going to female founders. It was reported, I think just a couple weeks ago, that just 2% of VC dollars went to female founders last year. That's the lowest figure since 2016. And this is happening against a backdrop of what, many headlines are saying, the boom, and I hate this word, the boom in femtech, the boom in all of these companies that are coming up for solutions for women. So what's happening here? Is this about the size of the checks? Carrot's doing 115 million in funding. So what are you seeing behind the scenes in terms of these numbers being so disappointing?
Well, the numbers are deeply disappointing, and they are, I think, unfortunately, probably very daunting, particularly for new founders. And so, I try to spend as much time as I can sort of talking to especially young female founders and supporting them in their efforts to, build businesses, build world-changing, scalable, impactful businesses. For us, the earliest, for me personally, I'll say for me personally, since in the earliest years, I mean, the venture landscape for fertility healthcare was pretty abysmal. Most people did not think that that fertility would be something that is applicable to tens of millions and frankly billions of people around the world. And so, in many ways, the first $1 million that we ever raised from venture capital was harder than the last, whatever, call it 50. For us, the category has matured and it has evolved so much so that the VC industry clearly recognizes what a big opportunity this is, and their approach is much different. But that doesn't excuse the fact that there is so much work to do in this space to make sure that underrepresented and underestimated founders continue to get more and more access to capital to build the products and services that people need. And it's a huge problem. And I hope that, at least to some extent, our story and our example can be motivating and give young founders some hope.
It should be motivating. And that growth has been palpable, at least from my seat. Tammy, I remember when I met you when you were just starting Carrot, either in 2016 or 2017. And I think you were the first founder that I met who was even talking about fertility. And now I don't think a day goes by that I don't get some pitch about fertility, which makes competition hard for you, but does show kind of the growth that's happening right now in the industry, which I think is great. Tammy, before I let you go, what can we expect from Carrot moving into 2022? Any exciting projects that you're working on or things we should be looking out for?
Well, we're going to double down on a couple of key areas. We are by far the market leader in terms of global fertility benefits. We'll be investing heavily in our product, continue to invest heavily in our global product. We're also going to really invest in personalization. One of the areas of healthcare, one of the aspects of fertility healthcare that I think have long been ignored for far too long is personalization. In every other area of life, whether it's finance or another area of healthcare, you get products and services that personalize a path for you. That's what Carrot does, and that's where we're going to continue to invest. It's not a one cycle fits all approach. Not everybody needs access to the same types of care and treatment. And so making sure that each unique person, each diverse couple has a specific path that is personal for them and that is right for them is where we're driving our product and hopefully creating value for members and employers.
And that's just going to pay dividends to make sure that fertility is a more inclusive benefit as we're thinking about it holistically. Employers, managers, employees alike. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us on Working Together Live. I have a quote here I want to end on from Amelia. She says, having fertility care as a part of my benefits would absolutely impact my decision to stay with an employer. Amelia, I think that you are not alone with that. And Tammy from Bentonville, Arkansas, joining us. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much for having me again. It was great to see you.
That was Tammy Sun. She's the co-founder and CEO of Carrot Fertility. And thank you all for your comments. Working Together is not just a live show. It is also a weekly newsletter that's hitting your inbox every Wednesday morning. For more on equity in the workplace and the leaders changing the face of business, check out the link in the comments. All right, next Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, I'll be back with you with Eventbrite CEO Julia Hartz. We'll be talking about leadership and disruption and what we can expect from the wild and crazy world of future of events. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thank you for joining us on Working Together Live.